Hello everyone, and welcome to another cast of Grand Prix Rome. I am that damn Pipsqueak, and I'm bringing you coverage of the Round 2 match between a Lotless Troll, aka GenderTerrorist, on Red-Black Discard, and DrChillbrain on Red-Black Burn. So both these decks are fairly aggressive, but I think it's hard to argue that any deck in the format is more aggressive than Chillbrain's list. Um, Having access to just a ton of burn spells. Like this hand represents, what is this, 9, 11, 13 points of burn, and any amount of damage that a Lotless Troll takes from their mana base will just start to stack up really quickly. Um, I also really like this keep on Chillbrain's part. Frequently in burn decks, you can sometimes see people getting greedy or like to want creatures or whatever, but A, Lotless Troll has plenty of creature removal, and B, when you have a hand that's 2 burn spells and a bunch of burn, it's really hard to justify mulliganing that. Although something that is a little bit awkward is you do need black to cast these burn spells. Um, and Children just drew his third land, which isn't a black source. So that's a bit awkward. If you look at Chillbrain's mana base, there are some slight issues in terms of black count. And also having to spend this Storm Surge killing a creature is really not where you want to be. It might be the right move, but it's ugly. This is not the ideal circumstance. Like, we're about to end turn 2, and Chillbrain is about to have used up all of his burn, and GenderTerrorist is still going to be at 13 life. So, remember how I was just complimenting the hand? I'm starting to reconsider that. At the same time, this can be turn 3. So it could be Madcap Merc, discard a redundant Fate Shaper, play Corpse Bed, set up for turn 3 Dusk Lieutenant. I think it's more likely that we'll see like an end of turn Fate Shaper or something, however. Um, but that's an interesting kind of decision point that is available to GenderTerrorist. Uh, so yeah, we didn't see any things played, which means there's a Fate Shaper. That Fate Shaper should be able to just eat this Banished Companion that is about to be played and swung with. Um, or we might see a Distant Thunder kill it, but I think Fate Shaper's the right move. So we're going to see a Fate Shaper trade? Looks like it. And it's one of those things where getting to spend your creatures as Doom Blades versus the Burn deck is going to feel good, generally speaking. Um, One advantage Aggro decks have versus Red Black Burn is its its creatures tend to not be particularly good. Suitor of the Seas is some form reach, Carry Distant is some form reach, but the deck, unlike Blue Red Burn, doesn't have access to Plasma Addict, which is just kind of air supremacy in the creature-based matchups. So when Red Black Burn's burn plan, like Lava Spike wise, isn't working out, that really can cause a lot of problems for it. And hitting the naturally drawn untapped land of the mountain rather than having to play with the corpses. Ooh, interesting. So I thought we would see a Dust Lieutenant played out, but instead we're going to see another Hold Up Fate Shaper and Distant Thunder. It's it's a conservative line, and it's not a bad one. Um, like, you definitely are in a slightly interesting position because versus this burn deck, you do need to kill them eventually, because if you don't, you'll just die to a sufficiently drawn number of lava spikes. Um, Lava Thorn Fields is a little bit awkward because you really didn't want to draw any more lands, but on the other hand, it's Black Source, so that just unlocked 4 points burned. So, if you're on the other side of the table, you have to be kind of glad that your burn opponent is currently sitting on 4 lands. That's like kind of the fail case. But you do need to end this game before you take another 4 spikes to the face. Um, hmm. I imagine that we'll see a turn that's Concealed Slasher plus Madcap Mercenary, discarding Corpse Bed, into next turn Dusk Lieutenant and try to just strip the remainder of Chillbrain's hand. Interesting that we saw the play out of this Corpse Bed. Um, I don't think I agree with that. This matchup isn't. I don't think is going to come down to a Lotless Troll having the 4th land as much as I think the tempo efficiency on these threats is key. But I could be wrong. Um, Lotleth is swinging for 2 this turn with a Fate Shaper, and next turn could swing for another, 7 off of Madcap Merc and Concealed Slasher if both of them are played. We could also see a Dust Lieutenant. It looks like the plan of holding up Distant Thunder is what's going down. I don't, I don't dislike that. I'm not convinced it's the right move, but I think it's a logical one. Or it's one that's defensible. There is logic to it. I guess the better way of phrasing it. And drawing the 5th land is kind of the nightmare scenario here. Um, I generally wouldn't play it out in order to just like, have padding in my hand versus a Dust Lieutenant down the line, if need be. Um, Especially because the difference between 4 and 5 mana is never going. Well, okay, so that's untrue. I forgot about Reckless Festivities. It's possible that Reckless Festivities does mean you want to hit all of your land drops because it increases the chance that a Reckless Festivities will be lethal. And Reckless Festivities is also another reason that you really want to put as much pressure on Chillbrain's deck as possible, because the lower its life total, the less likely it is to be able to do a lethal Reckless Festivities against you. Um, the number of cards you can draw off Reckless Festivities when you're at 12 life is, obviously substantially more than what you can afford to safely draw when you're at 5 life. I wonder if we'll see a Lotleth Troll discard a card. I disagree with casting this Curse of Bleeding, actually, because if you sit on it, you increase the chance that a Lotleth Troll will try to will discard a card in order to try to get you, and in which case you can just cast the Curse of Bleeding in response. Uh, I'm not usually a big believer of waiting until the last possible second to do anything, in aggro decks at least, but I think this is a pretty clear-cut opportunity. But it also doesn't matter. A Lotleth Troll has lethal on board, so Chillbrain's only out here is Reckless Festivities. That is not the out. Yeah, that there's lethal on board. Um, yeah, Chillbrain agrees. All right, so let's get to sideboarding. Um, Pulling up the list for these decks really quickly. So Chillbrain's lit. Okay, so it's nah. My mastery of the alphabet is second to none. So GenderTerrorist here. Um, Bogborn Exorcist feels pretty good versus Red Blackburn. You can use it as a Chupacabra once they've cast a burn spell. I'd also be a little bit tempted by Batwing Initiate because of lifelink, although paying life kind of sucks, and Memento Mori has some appeal. Um, I think that Gift of the Phoenix is a massive liability in this matchup, and I wouldn't want it. And I think I'd be hard pressed to actively, and I think I would also cut Corpse Bed and or Cradle of Corruption, especially on the draw. So, there's some number of -2, -3. Um, Dwarven War Hatchet feels a little clunky here, but on the other hand, you kill people, so maybe -4, and you're trying to fit in somewhere on the order of either 4 or 5 cards. Chillbrain, very straightforward mana base. Maybe you want the Soul Release. I think your opponent has enough burn spells and doesn't have enough life gain that I think I might want to just pull even more aggressively into the Lava Spike clan. Um, like, it's possible these Curse of Bleedings should become Forbidden Brews, or at least 3 of them should, since it's just more mana and card efficient to burn out that way. But you really don't want to overboard when it comes to these aggro decks. So let's go ahead and get back into game number 2. Chillbrain is on the play and has mulligan to 6. GenderTerrorist has managed to keep a 7, and we saw the Batwing Initiates come in. Corpse Bed also stayed in. So I think we'll see a turn 1 Corpse Bed into turn 2 fetch for a black source and be able to play this Batwing Initiate. On Chillbrain's side, we did see the Soul Releases come in, but we also still see the Curse of Bleeding, so I'm kind of curious what happened there. I think it's probable that we'll see a Storm Surge orchestrated into turn 2 Rikiri Dissident and just try to run your opponent down. Lotleth Troll does have removal spell, but it's only coming down turn 3, so not particularly quick on that one. Interesting we saw the Shardstone Rift. Well, obviously this is a matchup where you don't want to play Shardstone Rift untapped. It is a land that you can play untapped, and so I'd be a little bit hesitant to not prioritize playing the Corpse Bed out, but I guess if you're trying to curve black into 1 red, you can't really use Corpse Bed at that point, and it's possible also Corpse Bed is being held onto as discard fodder. Yeah, GenderTerrorist is down to 15 life. Can play a Batwing Initiate, but will take 1 damage to do so. The Death Touch lifelink makes it a fairly good blocker, but, Rikiri Dissonant will have done its 3 damage. You can't really ask for too much more. From here, I guess the question is, do you Curse of Bleeding to turn off the Batwing? So Curse of Bleeding is a Lava Spike here, because it turns off the lifelink and deals 2. So that's kind of tempting. It's possible we would also see one of these, and when I say Lava Spike, I mean Searing Spear. It's possible we could also see some of these come down, but I think The line I like the most from this board state is Curse of Bleeding, Swing Rikiri Dissonant when a block is declared, Curse of Bleeding. Your opponent's now at 10. Oh, interesting. Okay, so is valuing keeping the Rikiri Dissonant in play to try to push more damage? Uh, with the perfect information we have, that doesn't seem like a good move, but I, I like the idea, in abstract. I also didn't notice that last turn we saw a fetch for a swamp rather than a fetch for a red-black duel. So that's a concession to not being able to play this Fiery Temper out on curve if need be. So we're going to have to see, a Dust, a Dust Lieutenant probably come down as another blocker. But Chillbrain is out of burn spells that actually kill Dust Lieutenant. Whoa. Okay, so we're going to see a Batwing Initiate come down. And actually, corpse betting away the Brazen Sacrilege does kind of suck. A lot of the power of Brazen Sacrilege is in its flashback mode. But Basalt Charm does actually kill Batwing Initiate somehow. So I suspect that's what we'll end up actually seeing. It's not the most mana efficient, but it feels like a forced play. If it was right last turn to kill the Batwing Initiate, it's probably still right this turn to do so. And if once that goes, GenderTerrorist will be at 8 life. We'll go down to 7 to cast another spell, and then we do have Lethal Burn still in hand. So maybe Chillbrain did find the line. Nope, Chillbrain is not going for the Basalt Charm. That's interesting. I feel like even here I would have offered the block. Like, you don't want this Batwing Initiate to be able to start attacking in and building up counters. You need to put the pressure on. So the scry off the Soul Release is definitely nice. Okay, if you're attacking with their Carry Dissonant, I definitely disagree with casting the Soul Release pre-combat. If your opponent trades off, you want to not take the damage off the Rikiri Dissonant. And you also just don't want them to know what you're going to do with your mana. You should offer that trade before your opponent knows they're about to get Soul Released. I also am not sure how much I like Soul Release. Like, Curse of Bleeding here would have done the same amount of damage, Virtual 3, for the same mana cost. You wouldn't have gained a life or Stride, but now you're not going to have lethal next turn unless you Stride a land to the top. I guess you still will, because even if your opponent casts a... Well, no, you won't have lethal unless you have a land. Yeah, I think Chillbrain is missing a couple points here and there in some of these games, and that's one of the things that you have to just really get better at optimizing as burn decks is just removing all of those little points that you're losing, because if you add them all up, sometimes it's like an entire lightning bolt, which obviously... Oh, it looks like Chillbrain also missed a... Oh, Chillbrain missed the trigger for Rikiri Dissonant, technically. GenderTerrorist doing them a solid and catching it. And it's not going to matter. We're going to have a Basalt Charm plus Soul Release for lethal. And I agree with keeping Curse of Bleeding in hand once you've chosen not to show it off. It's possible you're trying to keep it as a surprise, make your opponent think you boarded it out. But yeah, that will be game 2, and now GenderTerrorist is taking game 3 on the play. I think that second game was a much better showing for Black-Red Burn, and I definitely think the matchup favors Black-Red Burn here. But it's not by any means a shutout. Alright, so this is a really interesting hand from GenderTerrorist. Whoa, I would have kept that. That's an interesting decision. Because you have the ability to do turn 1 Curse Bed, turn 2 Madcap plus create Putrid Lurker. That's a lot of pressure. It's possible that GenderTerrorist is prioritizing different things in this matchup than I would be, though, so that's interesting. I would probably put Crumbling Precipice on the bottom. You just need to fetch a black or red on turn 1, and then all your lands come in untapped, which is excellent. Chillbrain got to keep 7 cards, which is always just incredibly overpowered as a burn deck. And as we were talking about, Chillbrain already has, 9, 12, 14 points of burn rocked up in hand. Ooh, interesting. I wonder why Lotleth Troll decided to keep the Crumbling Precipice instead of the second Lava Torn Fields. I would have assumed that taking the damage off Crumbling Precipice was less appealing. I also think that this is a solid decision, sequencing-wise, going with the Basalt Charm first, because it has the least power to kill creatures, and then keeping the Scorch and Storm Surge in hand in case your opponent plays a creature that you need to answer. I assume we'll see a Concealed Slasher here. I think it would be wrong for a Chillbrain to kill this. Until you draw something like a Rikiri Dissonant that demands you care about the board state, I think you should just keep chucking burn spells upstairs. Again, drawing the fourth land is not ideal here, but it's far from the end of the world. I assume we'll see a Lava Torn Fields come down, and then in the blind, I think the correct answer is Soul Release. Yeah, because getting the Scry on is valuable here. You do not want to draw another land. If you get to bottom a land off of this, that's basically +1 turn in terms of draws. Chillbrain chooses to keep it top, so it's probably another Bolt effect or a burn creature. I think so. GenderTerrorist is now facing down another 8 points of burn hands. That puts them at 5. If they take a damage off of this Crumbling Precipice, that's put them to 4. So that's starting to get a little dicey, and this is why I think keeping the second Lava Torrent Fields was better. This turn we could see a Dusk Lieutenant come down, or we could see a Madcap Merc. Discard the second Crumbling Precipice. Kind of like putting down the Madcap Merc more, because you don't take damage, but Dusk Lieutenant does have value in terms of eating away at your opponent's hand, which is a good reason for Chillbrain to now keep the Crumbling Precipice in hand. Drawing another Storm Surge is great. So Chillbrain is up to 11 points of burn hand. So you just don't burn any of the creatures. Don't cast the Storm Surge. Scorch Face. Be prepared to Curse of Bleed. Oh no, it is good to cast the Storm Surge. I screwed up mentally. And now you just pass turn, because what you can do is you can Curse of Bleeding your opponent and put them on their turn. They take 5, and then they don't know that they can't tap the Crumbling Precipice without dying. You want to put your opponent in the position where they can fuck up and die. Oh god. And we're seeing Chillbrain focus down the board state. I think this is a huge mistake. You could put your opponent to 1, which 1 life is so unbelievably close to dead. You're turning off. You're effectively also stone raining them because you're taking them off the Crumbling Precipice. As is, your burn now takes them to 4, which, even with the Crumbling Precipice, means that you still need to draw an entire other spike to get lethal here. Whereas before, just another Curse of Bleeding would do it. Maybe Chillbrain is worried about Dusk Lieutenant being able to discard multiple cards a turn. It's only once per turn that it has its effect, so that's not the case, if so. As long as you keep the Crumbling Precipice in hand, I don't think there's a way you can lose your hand there. I think you put yourself in a really powerful game-winning position. But this game obviously isn't over in any way. We could easily see GenderTerrorist pull things together in a very worrisome way, and we could obviously still see Chillbrain burn spell off the top or something. Reckless Festivities is a good one, but it's very far from free. When you're facing down 5 power on board, plus the Concealed Slasher represents another 2 points at least from hand, so actually 3 points. This is effectively 8 points of damage. So if you take 9 or more damage from your Reckless Festivities and your opponent has literally nothing, you lose. So I'd be a little bit worried about casting it, but also it gets worse the longer you wait to cast it. So I'm really not sure what the proper move is. Drawing a Putrid Lurker is very scary here. I think the proper move, if you're GenderTerrorist, is you discard the Putrid Lurker into play with Concealed Slasher. You hold up Distant Thunder to kill a 2/2 attacker. And yeah, you just put your opponent down to 11 once you include the Putrid Lurker bonus. And if you're Chillbrain, you got to throw down this Curse of Bleeding, and you got to pick a God and Pray. Your opponent's at 4. You need to draw land and 2 spikes without going to less than 3 life, which Chillbrain doesn't know that last little detail. Storm Surge is a great draw. I think it's really tempting here to orchestrate it before Reckless Festivities. I think this is correct, though. We are now playing Blackjack, except neither bust for either of these players is 8 life or any life, respectively. I assume Chillbrain is waiting to see if GenderTerrorist wants to do anything with it here. And GenderTerrorist needs to read the card. So for anyone who is seeing this card for their first time, Reckless Festivities is effectively a multiplayer ad nauseum for 3 mana, which means it works great in burn decks because your opponent's life matters way more than your life, so you break the symmetry of it inherently. Alright, hits the Unjust Sentence. So that's game. Stop flipping. Yep. And now what you get to do is land, Storm Surge Orchestrate, Unjust Sentence, lethal you. So, very close game. If GenderTerrorist got to take another turn, she had this, but unfortunately, that was just not in the cards. DrChillbrain played that fairly well. There definitely were a couple errors in there, but I think deck building wise, there were some really smart decisions. And now DrChillbrain is 1-1, and GenderTerrorist is 0-2. GenderTerrorist is unfortunately no longer live for top 8 consideration, but DrChillbrain still very much is. But you still might see me cast future games with GenderTerrorist in this tournament because we do have 5 rounds of Swiss. So until GenderTerrorist decides that they're done or they've played through 5 rounds, they're allowed to just keep rolling. Yeah, as the players quickly chat about how much they like each other's decks, I'm going to sign off here. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the GP.